There we go, Chair, we're live.
Good morning, well, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this joint scrutiny committee. One substantive agenda item. And it's a joint committee of all our scrutiny committees, and we've got many councillors and officers in attendance with this. Item 1 on your agenda is apologies. We've just heard from Councillor Adrian that he's sending his apologies. Kath, whose else has you received?
Yes, Chair, we've received apologies, therefore, from Councillor Adrian Jones, Councillors Gareth E. Jones and Councillor Jeremy Pugh, who are committee members, and we've also received apologies from Councillor Cabinet Member James Gibson-Watt and Councillor Pete Roberts. We've also got apologies from officers Catherine James and Matthew Perry.
Thank you for those apologies. They'll be recorded. Are there any others to be given today? No. Just for information, we're just about core it, so we'll continue as long as we are, but we'll monitor that as we go through the meeting. But hopefully others will join us, because there's a lot of apologies which haven't been given. Item 2 in your agenda is disclosures of interest. Anybody got anything to disclose? And similarly at item 3, declarations of party whip. Anything to comment on there? Okay, on both those items, and judging on your silence, we'll move on. Item 4 on your agenda is the Q4 Strategic Risk Register and report. Members, unless I'm told differently, we will scrutinise this report. There is one item which we will have to go into confidential item, and it's CT 0067. So if members can refrain from commenting on that, and we will go into confidential session surrounding that. Members, I won't inform you why we need to go into confidential session on that, but I will do when we are in confidential session. And there was a bit of confusion in our pre-meet why we needed to go into scrutiny into confidential session in relation to that. Since our conversation with the monitoring officer, and it's a valid reason to be confidential, so I will explain that when we go into confidential session. Is everybody clear on that?
Yes.
Okay, this is a comprehensive document, a lot to get through. We need to try and get through it because it's an important document for the authority. Who would like to lead on this as an introduction?
I'll do that as portfolio holder with
Okay, thank you,
responsibility.
Councillor David. I should have realised that. Thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. As you stated, there are two sections to what we'll be considering today with regard to the Q4 risk. That's the first section, which contains 12 strategic risks. I'll just outline that report shortly, and then when we go into confidential session, there'll be another 2 risks that you'll be able to review and questions heads of service on. So just for the purpose of the start of the meeting, Strategic Risk Register Report Q4. I won't go through the background with regard to risk management, etc., because you've got the report in front of you, and that's fairly easy to understand. So I'll just go straight into the actual measures themselves. So at the end of Q4 24-25, there are 12 risks on the Strategic Risk Register, and all strategic risk owners have been asked to provide a short summary of progress since the last quarter to give assurances that mitigating actions are being actioned and monitored. If you look at Appendix A, which is contained in the report, the 12 strategic risks and their mitigating actions are identified, and the controls required and progress reviews are contained therein. Appendix B is the normal heat map that accompanies the risk register, which allows you to see the assessment of and process visually. During the quarter, one risk has changed its probability or impact rating, and that's risk WO0022 if the council is unable to recruit and retain the workforce it requires with the necessary skills and experiences. The probability changed from likely to possible, so the rating's gone from 16 to 12. And the reasoning for that, over the last quarter, the service has reviewed some of the successes of the recruitment and retention project and identified next actions. These were reported in a deep dive session to the Governance and Audit Committee in March 2025. Just below that, you've got the review of the impact and outcomes and the next steps coming out of that. As a result of these outcomes, the score of the risk has been reviewed. Given the successes outlined in the current situation, the score of the risk has reduced from 16 to 12. The reason for the reduction is that the probability of the risk occurring is considered to have reduced to possible rather than likely. 3.6, it mentioned the fact that during March 2025, Audit Wales came in to audit the Council on risk management, and they interviewed the Chief Executive, the Chair of Governance and Audit Committee, portfolio holder, that's myself, and Corporate Transformation, and a range of other senior officers. That we don't have the results of that report yet, but obviously that's out of our control. It's with Audit Wales, and it wasn't just Powys. There were a number of local authorities in Wales that were being audited on risk management at the same time, so we're still awaiting that report. With regard to resource implications, there are no direct resource implications in relation to this report. However, all risk owners need to consider the resource implications of managing the risk and decide if the best course of action is to tolerate or treat. I'll leave it at that, Chair. The Head of Finance comments are included in the report on legal comments, and Section 10 has got the recommendations that'll go to Cabinet. I think what the intention is to go forward is that we could actually look at Appendix A, at the risks contained in this first report, and we could take them in order, and the heads of service could offer commentary around the risk, and members of the committees can put questions to that heads of service. If that's fine with you, Chair.
Yeah, no, I'm more than content with that because it'll give us some structure. I think, firstly though, are there any questions or comments in relation to the general strategic risk oversight, or before we go into individual questions? Is everybody understanding how this register is compiled, etc., etc.? So I'm going to say, have we got any general questions in the first instance until we go into individual risks? No? Everybody happy with that then? Oh, Councillor Karina.
I'm sorry, I'm thinking about Appendix B and the heat map, and you've got two, why have you got two displays? Maybe asking a simple question there.
Yeah, no, it might be, but it's a good question to understand that before we go into individual risks. Have we got an answer for that, please?
Can I just find the heat map just to see exactly what Karine is querying and see if I can answer that?
I also am having a look as well, Councillor David, so I understand. Go on.
I think one's the harm and the other's the probability.
Okay. What pages are those, Councillor Karina?
I'm sorry, I'm looking directly at Appendix B. So, page 41, sorry.
There we go. That'll help us find it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, one's after mitigations now.
Yeah, one's harm and the other's probability, I think.
Oh, right, I've got it, yeah. One's the inherent rating, that's as Alid, I think that was then. Just mentioned the other one, the residual rating, is after the mitigation's been applied.
Is everybody clear on that?
Yeah.
Good. Thank you. Certainly gives us some clarification there. Okay, I've got Councillor Peter next, please.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just a general one for a recap, really, is so we've got the risks on there. It's just how do they get on there in the first place?
Okay, that's a good question.
Who identifies them? Who flags them up? Who decides they go on there with whatever score initially?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. How are they escalated to the risk register? Just some clarity surrounding that, please.
Well, the services have their own risk registers, and any risk that actually, generally speaking, if a high score risk, normally around the 15 mark, sometimes slightly below, a recommendation can be made to place it on the strategic risk register. So
Okay.
it's escalated from the service areas. I think Jane wants to come in.
Yeah, no, she does indeed.
Yeah.
Yes, thanks, Jane. Before you come into that, Jane, Councillor David has given us an introduction to that answer. So are we confident that the risk scores are consistently marked the same across different services as well? So I'm adding that to your answer as well, please.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So in terms of the first question about how do risks get highlighted, That will happen at a service level. However, we do also look at risk more generally at a corporate level. So the corporate leadership team would have a view, we keep an eye on what's happening nationally, internationally. All of those factors help us gauge the level of risk that the authority is under. So it's all of those things that we consider when placing risks on the relevant register. In terms of how they get escalated to the strategic risk register, Councillor David is absolutely right. It depends on the score of the risk, and if they reach a certain threshold, they are automatically moved to the strategic risk register. However, in some instances, it could be that some risks would sit there just because we need that oversight at a strategic level. So that may be slightly different. In terms of how they are scored, there is a risk management framework. That framework clearly indicates to everybody considering risk across the authority certain thresholds and certain things to consider, and there is a scoring matrix there that says what level of score you should associate with a risk depending on what you're seeing individually. So that framework is in place to ensure that there is a level of consistency across the organisation. What we do as a senior leadership team as well is that we collectively review the risks that we hold, and that collective review helps us consider risks against each other. And again, we then consider whether they are appropriately scored at that corporate level as well. So I hope that gives you a good flavour of how all of that happens.
No, I think that certainly helps, Jane. Thank you very much for that. Councillor Chloe.
Thank you. Following on from Councillor Peters' question, I suppose really I was just wondering whether we have an opportunity to add risks that we think are missing to the register, or whether it's something that this isn't the forum for, so I understand whether we can contribute to it.
So emerging risks then.
Mm.
Yeah. Jane.
I'll come in. So as part of your scrutiny role, absolutely, if you feel there is a risk that you've identified that isn't here, then you can suggest that the authority, so the senior leadership team or a particular head of service, actually review that risk, and then it would be for officers to bring that forward as part of the overall remit.
Okay, that's good. Any more questions before we get into the detail? I think just something from my point of view is, and I think this will help us in understanding the register. One, how are the account holders for the risk held to account that they are monitoring that? How are the risks removed? When do we get to a stage where a risk is removed? How is the structure surrounding that? In the process for closing a risk, and how frequently are they reviewed and updated? So I think that will help us in our understanding when we go through the individual sightings on that, please. If that's you, Jane, just jump in.
I will do. Mary might want to add, but I'll pick up most of those. So in terms of monitoring, all services undertake routine management meetings. So the director, as part of those meetings, would routinely look at risk. It's something that I do, particularly across my service areas. And I think management teams, even below that at a head of service level, would routinely review their risks. We also pull that information up through the quarterly performance review meetings, and those are held with the portfolio holders as well present. So again, we would review the risks, challenge, monitor, and have those discussions at that level too. In terms of risks being removed, we would need to be comfortable that a risk no longer exists in order to do that. So again, that would be part of that review, challenge, and from your perspective as a scrutiny committee as well, you have a role in challenging that as well. So that's how they would be reviewed routinely. I'm hoping that's covered everything, but apologies, Chair, if I've missed any of the question.
Yeah, no, just in relation to the risk holder. How are we clear that they are accountable?
I think that's through that routine monitoring. So as I said, at a head of service level, at a director level, or actually at a portfolio holder level, if they feel they're not getting that level of assurance from the person that is managing that risk, then that challenge would happen through those mechanisms.
Okay, thanks, Jane. Is everybody, Councillor David?
Yeah, just to mention, with regard to individual risks, Governance and Audit Committee do conduct deep dives into many of these risks. And obviously, if they're not happy with the progress on one, they could make a recommendation.
Yeah, no, that's a good point to make, and I understand that they have already scrutinised this this report as well. Yeah, but I haven't had a look at their scrutiny really. So yeah, that's a good point to make. Okay, are we clear now on the overall direction of the risk register, and we're in a position to move on to the detail of the report? Yeah, I'm not seeing any hands. Councillor David, do you want to take us through the individual risks, or do you want me to lead on that?
Entirely up to you, Chair. That there's a list there in Appendix A. You could start from the top. And I think my understanding was that heads of service were going to give.
Yeah, no, I understand that. I was just wondering
commentary.
if you wanted to introduce them on that, really.
No.
Okay. Right. I've got to return on. Seem to be operating on one screen these days, so I'm just going to go into. Right. So let's have a look what the first risk is. Okay. The first one is 0029 ICT. Who wants to come in on that one?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I will bring in Head of Digital Services, Ellen Sullivan, on this one. Ellen,
Thank
please.
you.
Thanks.
Thanks you. Yeah, portfolios are in and they want to make a comment on this. Please jump in. Obviously, we're going. Welcome, Ellen.
Hi. Sorry, I'm just checking this is what risk it is, and this isn't the one that's in the confidential session this afternoon. It is, okay. So apologies, I'm not quite sure how that's ended up in the pack, but that risk is actually for the confidential session this afternoon. So if it's possible, I'll pick that up.
Yeah.
Chair, I've got an up-to-date list with regard to the first section of the meeting. Shall I go through that and just call the risk number and the head of service is assigned to, and that would introduce them? They can give a rough sort of high-level introduction to the risk, and we can take questions after that.
David, you're sincerely helping me out here. Thank you very much.
No problem, Chair. Thank you. So the first risk is EDR 0011, and that's around climate emergency, and that's assigned to Daniel Burgess.
Welcome, Daniel.
Thank you, Chair. Just checking everyone can see me. Is my video come on there? There was my sorry, Chair. Is my video come on there?
No problem.
Great. Can everyone? Fab. Thank you very much for that. So yes, thank you, Chair. So in terms of the risk 0011, the climate emergency has been declared by Powys County Council. If we experience the extreme consequences of not taking action, then we'll experience flooding, poor air quality, impact on nature and our communities. So this was last reviewed on the 2nd of May 2025. Work is continuing by the Climate and Nature Programme Board to finalise action plans and cost decarbonisation for the authority and implement wider aspirations across the county. Transformation funding has been secured. To secure, however, we do need some further funding to develop the feasibility budget for some of the work. So we are actually applying some shared prosperity funding to that as well to help keep that on track. The target had been set for March 2025, but actually we will need the additional funds to complete some of that work. In order to cost implementation plans, an audit of all corporate assets must be first undertaken. So that is currently underway. Some of the work is now complete. For example, schools and leisure centres has been undertaken and presented back to the portfolio holder, and work continues on the development of a net zero roadmap. We're actually referring to a route map rather than a roadmap, just because it gives a bit more of a wider definition, providing pathways to net zero and actions required to achieve targets aligned to the pathways due for completion in Q4 2025. So that's what we're working towards in terms of having a published route map on our transition to net zero. We've had 5 deep dives so far, with several more deep dives being planned for Q4 2025, which will further support action plan development and prioritisation of actions. So in terms of some of the controls that are currently in progress, as I mentioned, we have action plans in place within each areas of the climate strategy. Climate Nature Programme Board will be overseeing the action plans, quality and robustness. So, for example, we only met this week to look at KPIs for each of those. The Wales Office review concluded that as a council, we need to have fully costed plans, and that we need to articulate and evidence the emissions reduction and wider benefit outcomes of the actions we take. This will form part of a wider work of improving the quality and accuracy of the data we collect as part of the carbon accounting to enable senior officers and members to prioritise and make informed decisions. So part of the deep dive, we've in engagement with stakeholders and experts outside of the local authority, we've undertaken that, and with the climate declaration being made, we need to engage with a broader number of stakeholders as possible, both internally and externally, to tackle the emergency. We have EMT/SLT dedicated session take place in December to focus on risk and plan strategic mitigation. Sorry, last December that was completed, and carbon accounts reporting is underway. In terms of the implementing the Paris's climate strategy, the council has developed and endorsed the climate strategy and cabinet and EMT, which is now CLT. The climate strategy aligns with the corporate strategic equality plan, and the next phase of work will be focused on the development of a costed action plan aligned to the key areas within the strategy. So the annual report is currently going to scrutiny next week, which should be published with some information of what's been achieved.
Thank you, Daniel.
Okay.
Opening up on questions in relation to this, please. Councillor Angela.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Daniel. So I am sitting on the Climate and Nature Steering Group, so I am aware there's an awful lot of work going on in the background. And this is one of the biggest risks to the council here. Looking at this, we've got 3 of those bright pink ratings. But I'm just wondering, what's the 25 and 20 refer to within the squares?
Okay.
Is that the highest?
That's the highest, yeah. So that's the
It's out of 25.
Yeah, in terms of the level of risk.
Okay, so obviously, as I say, I'm aware a lot of work's going on, and you've highlighted some of it there. Could we assume that this might come down in colour because there's mitigations happening and the work that you're going in place? Is it
100%? Yeah, the more we do to the route map is absolutely critical on this. We can publish as a local authority the actions we need to transition to net zero. So by the publication of the route map this autumn, we'll be in a position to actually identify those teams with the work streams needed. At the moment, there's a lot of good work being done, which is captured in the annual report. But bringing that all together and actually focusing with the limited resource we have, a way forward for that team will be absolutely critical. So yes, that's the aspiration, certainly.
So the paper that's coming to ERC scrutiny is hopefully going to feed into this, and
Correct.
there may be a change in shade?
Yeah, that's right. We've already started on next year's report already, because actually, whilst it captured everything that was going on, it didn't really give us the detail that we needed for the route map.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you, Angela. Councillor Chloe. Chloe, you seem to have disappeared.
Sorry, can you hear me?
There we go. Yeah, we got you.
Sorry. Yeah, really pleased to see this, and I'm on the Climate and Nature Group as well with Angela, so it's been great to look at the KPIs this week. A couple of points from me. I was just wondering whether we can add in, under the risks or potential consequences, the impact this is going to have on farmers across Powys, in terms of both the economic impact on a lot of our businesses, but also then on our food supply, because I know food and supply chains around climate change and some of the extreme weather events we're going to get could impact on that quite significantly for communities when they get cut off. They need to have that resilient local supply. The other point, I'll just do them both together, is I know the National Park have done a lot of work around their climate, and I didn't really see it mentioned specifically, but presumably we're working with partners and developing similar things and using their numbers and stuff.
Exactly, and sorry, I should have been more, because when I said partners, does include obviously Ballybrook National Park and the PSB as well. So we're working in conjunction with some funding we've secured from UK government on that for their input and their areas of expertise to feed into our route map. So that's in hand. Thank you.
Content, Chloe?
Just on that first point, is it possible to add stuff about the impact it's going to have on farms?
Yeah, do we refer to as economic impact possibly? So a wider definition possibly, rather than just narrowing it down to one sector of our economy, which is farming? Do we consider it as a wider economic impact?
Yeah, I think economic impact makes a lot of sense. I think the other one, though, food separately is an impact if you can't get food into the country, or if you can't get food to communities, would also be good to include.
That's it. Yeah. No, thank you. Yep, certainly we'll put food in as well.
Thank you both. I've got Councillor Jackie and John Parsey indicating. Are you coming in here to give some assistance?
I'll wait for Karina to come in because she may have a similar question, but I do want to come in on the risk and the mitigation and where we're going with the risk register, if that's okay.
Okay, John, you've got your hand up.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jackie.
Thanks, Jack. I was just going to come and just assist Dan and Councillor Chloe then. The risks that you've described there are in my risk, which is HTR 0018, which we'll come on to later.
Okay, thank you, John. Councillor Karina.
Oh, I was just going to mention that you need to get outside funding, and apparently one reason why you've been marked down by Audit Wales is because we haven't been able to collect all the evidence surveys yet, and I wondered what the time frame for that was.
Yes, it's a good question. Actually, in terms of the timing of when the funding window closed, the funding window will actually close the reporting back at end of the financial year. So still in that process actually of clicking information in, and the next year's report will sorry, this financial year's report will have far more detail in terms of that what's being collated. So that there was the program ending end of the financial year, we still yet to collect some information back on those outputs. There's also a delay, unfortunately, with carbon accounts. There's a year's delay on that, so we are looking how we can bypass that as quickly as possible as well.
And could I please ask, it's very exciting about the March's investment platform, but when are you going to see a dividend from
gosh
those? Long time.
In terms of when we're actually launching the program, we're looking to test the market with taking the pilot out there to investors later this year, with the idea for the full program to be launched in May next year at investor events.
And did you say you get a management fee for that?
That's correct. The idea is by using an investment platform, we would take a management fee off that to generate revenue to tackle climate change within Powys County Council. So this is what we're currently, the Technical Design Authority, which contains both DEFRA and Welsh Government, is helping us to develop that and take it forward.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'll take Councillor Susan and then Councillor Gary. Hiya, Sue. Struggling with your microphone. There we go.
Oh, sorry, Chair. My question was about risks. Daniel has explained some of it, and I'm sure the rest of it will be explained when Jackie comes on. So thank you, Chair.
Okay. Councillor Gary.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, Dan and Co, I guess my worry with this risk, certainly in terms of looking to reduce it, is I think absolutely no doubt awful lot of work going on around best mitigation we can internally within Powys against some of those climate and nature emergencies, but the wider world around us is struggling with it all, and just we only have to look at warmest spring on record, prevalence of wildfires across our regions, third warmest June on record. I think where I struggle is the risk shows absolute progress internally within the authority, getting that data, robust data, and putting action plans against it, and that roadmap, great. But I think our risk still has to reflect that our impact is going to be limited on the wider global issues of climate change, climate chaos, and all of that sort of stuff. So to reduce it too far worries me a bit, because it takes our eyes off it a little bit. And I know what we're trying to do, and I did then just wonder whether we need to split this out a bit, because our action and mitigation internally of the local authority is going to be really good. I'm confident in that. But we have to match that with the risks around us, because this is a risk around climate and nature emergency, isn't it? Not what Powys are doing internally to address those. So that was just an observation, really. Thank you.
Okay. You know, it's a point well made, and I think Councillor Jackie's coming in with some summaries here, please.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair, for that. And I was going to come in because Councillor Angela asked the question around will we be able to see this risk reduced? I don't think I share the same optimism as Daniel on this one. Yes, we will be doing a lot to mitigate some of that risk, but I think what Councillor Gary was saying is spot on. What we've got here is a continuing risk. We don't actually know what it really looks like. So what we're doing, I think, is amazing to mitigate, exactly as you say, Councillor Gary, what we're doing within the authority. And actually we are permeating out from that as when we're working with our partners and when we're working collaboratively with other local authorities as well. So that work will permeate out, and I think we will have an impact. My concern is that if we're thinking of reducing this, I think actually we need to review the risk before we do something like that, because what we have at the moment is we're working towards reviewing what we're doing as an authority. I'm not sure what we're able to do. Sorry, I've got work going on in the house and there's a drill going on in the background here. What we're doing as an authority is focusing on what we can do to mitigate the risk. But that is, you're absolutely right, Councillor Gary, this is coming at us from all sides. And John Forsey, as head of HTR, also says that, you know, he's got things that he's dealing with. There are things in housing that we're having to deal with. There's things in education that we're having to deal with. So I think what I'm trying to say here really is that at some stage, I think we need to review this particular risk and see how, you know, what we're doing is mitigating, where it's mitigating, what impact that's having, but also in line with what else is coming at us. Are we going to have more storms? Are we going to have more droughts? Are we going to have more heat waves? Are we going to have, you know, extreme weather events? So I think we need to address that. So whilst I have your optimism in the forefront of my mind, Daniel, I think there is something we've got to address here, and perhaps we need to just revisit this and have a look at this and just tease it out to see where we're going. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, no, I'll just develop that a little bit further, Councillor Jackie. I think you're absolutely right in what you said. It appears to me, though, that the limited amount of transformation funding, it's clear how do we prioritise that makes the highest impact, and that will be a better understanding of how we deal with that risk. It's a very open-ended question, but obviously funding is going to have an important part on this. So when we estimate this risk, or when we deal with this risk, it's how do we prioritise what's going to have the greatest impact?
Yeah, yes, that's something we're doing at the moment, Chair. It is something which is absolutely the forefront of our minds. And I think Daniel explained about the deep dives that we've done so far. We're just planning a couple more deep dives. One of them will be looking at finance. One of them will be looking at, you know, how we actually achieve what we need to achieve. We know that it isn't going to come through our normal budget round. We're not asking for money that way, but what we are doing is investigating, and I think quite successfully now, looking at different ways that we will be able to fund this, expand and increase and grow the green growth agenda as well. And we know that we can do that fairly uniquely in Powys. And I think there's going to be a member development day towards the end of July. I think it's on the 31st of July, when we'll be able to explain that to all members and give you an inkling of what some of the things that we're doing to improve this and take that agenda forward. So you're absolutely right, Chair. This is going to be a huge challenge, how we're funding this, but we are looking at far more innovative ways that we can do this. It isn't just going to fund green growth, but actually will bring investment into the county as well.
Okay, it's clear you've got a direction on that, so I'm content with that. Councillor Gary, do you wish to come back? No, okay. Does that box off that risk, and can we move on to the next one?
Right, the next risk is a finance risk, 001, referring to the council's ability to deliver a financially sustainable budget over the short and medium term. That's assigned to Jane Thomas. The current inherent risk is 25 and the current residual risk is 20. I'll just say there, Chairs, this is part of my portfolio as well. It's a risk that's been there for some time. We have been delivering balanced budgets. But with the current economic climate and with the KPIs all over the place and the geopolitical situation, I think it's likely to remain with us for some time to come, because yesterday's events in the House of Commons actually proved the point how volatile all the economic KPIs are, with when you saw the price of gilts moving simply because of what happened in the Commons yesterday. And as quickly as they went up, they came back down again. But that just emphasises the problems we're facing there. But that said, Jane, I don't know if you or Mary would like to add to that.
Mary.
Shall I come in there? Thank you. I think one of the things that we're conscious of when we're bringing this report to you is that we're now really at the end of quarter 1 as well. So just wanted to give a bit of an update on the risk, really. So as Councillor David said, it's that, you know, the risk is around being able to deliver that financially sustainable budget over the short and medium term, so that we can achieve that financial resilience that we need. And we're all aware of the public finance environment that we're working with at the moment, and you know, Councillor David you know, explained there how volatile all of that is as well, and the challenges that we're facing as part of that. That said, with this risk, there are a number of mitigating controls and actions in place that help us to manage the risk, and it continues to be mitigated by strong budget management and monitoring across all services. And you know, another part of that, feeding into that, is achieving a surplus at the end of 24-25 as well, allowing us to shore up some reserves for greater financial resilience. And the other aspect is that work is progressing really well on the 5-year budget planning that we're doing as an authority. So, and that means that we're further ahead really with our budget planning than we have been in previous years. So, and importantly, as part of that, we're taking that longer term view. So we're looking at where we need to be in 2030, 31 and working backwards from there. So that's sort of changing the conversations that we're having when we're having those budget planning meetings as well. So all in all, as Councillor David said, it's not something that's going to disappear at all. It will remain with us. But I think the mitigations and the controls that we have in place are you know, mean that we are managing that risk as best we can, really.
Thanks, Mary. Councillor Allard.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mary and David. I do have concerns, and what highlights this is tomorrow's urgent council meeting. We really might talk about that medium-term planning for the budgets, which I welcome. But tomorrow we've got a potential significant additional cost to the council, and it's been taken right up to the deadline. So it is that question about planning, which I have real concerns about. We'll see how the next year's budget or the medium-term financial plan bottoms out, and see if that gap in the future years is reducing. I accept you can never get rid of it, but it needs to be on a reducing plane. And I also want to come back to this risk, because it's also impacted by other risks as well that we'll discuss this afternoon. Maybe, Chair, at the end, can I come back and link 2 or 3 risks together, if you don't mind? Thank you.
Yeah, no, that's no problem at all. Okay, thanks for that, Aled. I'm going to develop that comment a little bit, because I've got a feeling that I'm on the same lines as Aled here. Tomorrow, a drive of sustainable powers and an extra cost. So I'm going to add to Aled's comments. How are the sustainable powers initiatives being monitored for actual savings delivery? I need a better understanding on that on the top of Aled's question as well, please.
Can I just say, with regard to sustainable powers and the events tomorrow, tomorrow's meeting is in essence about an in-year environment. That there are recurrent costs, as you say, going forward into future budgeted years, and we'll accommodate those with the approval of the council tomorrow. But That said, I think what's important to remember with the the sustainable powers vision, the whole idea that the sustainable powers is to allow us to carry on delivering valued services to our residents within the financial envelope that is currently restricting us. Any additional costs that might be incurred within the vision itself, within sustainable powers, shouldn't be taken as something that's actually going to disrupt the program, because the important point at the end of the sustainable powers vision is the fact that the net savings to the council are what counts, and that's what will allow us eventually to deliver the services we want to carry on delivering to our residents. So the point I'm making is, as we go along this road, you're going to see some services incurring extra costs, but in turn that will allow us to reduce costs in other services, and the net figure at the end will be enough to ensure that services are sustainable. We can go forward and carry on delivering them to our residents.
Yeah, no, thank you, David. That's a good explanation. I was just asking, how do we monitor that sustainable powers will supply that delivery of savings? That's the key to it from my point of view.
Well, it's an ongoing vision. It's incorporated around every budget we've had now for the last 3 years, and there have been successive years where we've actually identified savings coming out of sustainable powers, and that'll be the same going forward. I think Jane might, or Mary might be able to give us some figures that correlate to those savings within each budget year, if that's what you're asking for, Chair.
Yeah, thank you, David. I'll take Jane and then I'll come back to you, Aled. Jane, please.
Thank you, Chair. So just reiterating some of what's already been said, but in terms of the 5-year plan, that will really help with that longer term planning. I think as a council, due to a recent Audit Wales commissioning review, which hasn't been made public as yet, but I think following through from that, we realise that we will have to do more to improve our whole commissioning framework. And I think that will strengthen the areas around making sure that we are acting well in advance, commissioning services, procuring services in a way that enables us to plan much better over the longer term. In terms of monitoring the delivery, David is absolutely right in terms of monitoring that through our budget. Mary's already mentioned in terms of that routine budget monitoring report. All savings being delivered are monitored through that on a quarterly basis. We routinely monitor that again through the performance meetings with heads of service. We are looking, you'll be aware that we have a transformation programme in place that is assisting us becoming a sustainable council, and the activity that we've undertaken last year has been subject to a really robust review to understand the impact of those changes and be clear that it's being effective. And I think that will be working its way through Cabinet and the Scrutiny Committee, I think it's Finance Panel at some point. So it's not quite ready for that public consumption, but it will be. And I think that will all add to the rigour that we've now put in place in terms of that monitoring.
Okay, thanks, Jane. Councillor Aled.
Yeah, just a quick note on what Jane said. Finance Panel can sit in confidential session, so the sooner the Finance Panel sees this work, the better. But having said that, tomorrow we are being asked as a council to make environment, and it's a commitment for 7 years. It's you're looking at a 7-year contract on the bus routes, and we can see the step change in transport delivery. It's to be welcomed, but it does come at a significant cost. But we do not see the step change in other services that will bounce off this increased costs. So we're getting things in piecemeal, in small chunks, and not being we don't have that overall vision. So it's so important that we have that overall vision as soon as we can. But I wait with interest to see those next steps. But we've been asking for input for the last 3 years. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, that's the point made, and undoubtedly this debate will continue tomorrow. So we'll leave that point there. But we understand what you're saying. Just before we finish on this risk, David, you mentioned in the beginning about our external factors. Is there a quick answer to explaining how sensitive the medium-term financial plan, how sensitive it is to our external factors? Are they big? Is it a big mitigation to our finance resource going forward? Yeah, that's an open-ended question, I know, but just how much do those external effects affect our budget?
Well, we've got our economic advisors, and we can build forecasts into our projections for inflation, interest rates, etc., etc. But as I said earlier, the situation currently is so volatile. I wish I could get into Donald Trump's mind, perhaps. We might be able to get some more accurate predictions, but projections. But no, we do build into the program some projections, but unfortunately they do change very, very quickly. And this is why you see some of the final figures within the medium-term financial plan changing on a quite regular basis.
Okay, thank you. Jane.
Can I just add to that? I think, external factors have such a significant impact on the funding that we receive, as well as the costs of the authority. And just to add to what Councillor Thomas has already said, but we do work collaboratively across Wales with the WLGA, with Wales Fiscal Analysis supporting the WLGA. We monitor everything coming out of a UK government. And we, as I said, we work collaboratively to understand the impact across all councils in Wales, and are able then to feed that back to Welsh Government so they are clear of the challenges that we all face. So we do an awful lot in that sphere to make sure that we're heard and it's considered.
Okay, that answers that. Okay, happy to move on from that risk.
And the next one,
yeah, go on, David.
The next one, Chair, is Highways 0018, which refers to the nature emergency that we declared, and the current inherent risk is 25 with a residual rating of 20, and that's assigned to John Forsey.
John, anything further to add there?
As part of the risk, you'll see there that we last reviewed this back in April. We've now had confirmation of the local places for nature grant this year now, which is around about £500,000, which is a mixture of capital and revenue, which is all really welcome. But we mentioned costs before. Whilst it's a welcome sum of money, it's quite a long way off, where we'd like it to be to really start pushing this ahead. Coming back to Councillor Chloe's points earlier, so the risks we identified, if we do not take action to address the nature of an emergency declared by Powys County Council, then the impact of this emergency will affect our ability to deliver future services, with the consequences of reduced productivity in agriculture, forestry, fisheries, impacting livelihoods of residents and economic stability. So it is within this risk. But we still try and we still carry on delivering on our Section 6 duties. We're looking at biodiversity opportunities across the county farms estate, along with implementing the nature recovery action plan with our partners, as has been suggested before.
Okay, John, questions in relation to this risk? Okay, no, Councillor Karina, Councillor Jackie's coming in as well. Councillor Karina first, please.
Sorry, I've just read that you haven't had a biodiversity officer for a year and you've just got a new one. How are you going to establish a new plan of work?
That would be down to the service manager, but I think that just describes some of the challenges we're having with the other risks around recruitment. But it's good that they're in place now. They will be picking up the nature recovery action plan, etc., as part of that work.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jackie.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, John, for explaining all that. Really, again, this is a very diverse area. But coming back to what I was saying earlier about how we are looking to support our green economy in Powys, our green economy is very much part of our nature work as well, and the work that we're doing here. And if we want to stop the depletion of nature, then we're going to have to do quite a lot to achieve that. So the work that we're doing with the March's environmental investment platform will feed into this, and importantly, it will feed into our rivers as well. So the work that we're doing already for flood alleviation, which again sort of goes across the different portfolio or different senior leadership roles, is really, really important. And all we can do to support that, again, fits into what Councillor Chloe was talking about, is how we support our farmers. So water collection, all kinds of things to do with our rivers, and how we're working together with our nutrient management boards for the Severn, the Wye and the Usk, 3 of the most important rivers in the UK, and they all start and run through our county. So a lot of the work that we're doing around that as well is around supporting our biodiversity. And coming back to the Powers Nature Partnership, it's very much partnership. That's what's in the title. And we work alongside our partners to deliver lots of different projects. Powys is just the administrator. We don't decide what those projects are. That comes from the communities and from the people who are already doing things like that in Powys. So just to sort of make those links for you as well, this is really very much across the whole of the authority. And what we're doing in biodiversity actually impinges on most of the other work that we do, including housing, because what we're doing is improving our green spaces. And as soon as you start talking about it as green spaces, then you can start getting more imaginative about what you can do to support this, because you can think of lots of different areas. So it's verges, it's those village greens, it's our play areas, and what's surrounding. Even if you look outside County Hall, you'll see the big lake there. That's an amazing place for biodiversity. So if we can start supporting all of those things, then I think you can see how important this is and what an impact we can make here in Powys.
Thanks, Jackie. That was an important insight. The one thing you didn't mention in that was the connection with planning. And I'd just like you to consider the impact of planning on this biodiversity and land use. So I'm going to take Councillor Angela there now, but I wonder if you could explain the association with that in relation to planning as well. Councillor Angela.
Yeah, so I was looking at the full report there that we've had, and there is a lot of information there under the risk register about what has been done. And obviously I'm aware of this from the Climate and Nature Steering Group, but I'm going to repeat the question that I asked of Daniel to John. Here we've got one of these items that's the highest risk on this risk register, but the nature emergency, as Jackie has really highlighted there, is within our gift. So there is a lot more that we can influence. So is there some point at which John would assume that these risks can come down once we start seeing some benefits from all the work that is happening?
I think Councillor Jake is coming in there, so we'll leader.
Sorry, yes, I wasn't answering Angela's point,
Okay.
but I was going to step in relation to strategic policy in the LDP, which I think is where you were referring to planning. Obviously, we're reviewing the LDP at the moment, and the LDP working group next week is we'll start to see the first batch of draft policies to be brought forward under the preferred strategy that we've already got. And the challenge that I had from the Nature and Climate Partnership that is established is to make the LDP as sustainable as it possibly can be. And the challenge there is, of course, in being environmentally, socially and economically sustainable, you'll appreciate things are in tension between themselves, because the most sustainable plan environmentally would be to not build anything at all, wouldn't it? It would be to not have any carbon costs going forward, but that wouldn't be socially or economically sustainable. So we have to make sure those tensions are right, and we need to bring forward a plan which is as sustainable as it can be, is supportive of our local communities as sustainable places, and of course does all the usual stuff around warm homes and photovoltaics and community energy generation, etc., etc. So the LDP process in itself will seek to adopt the sustainability criteria, respond to the nature and climate emergencies in a really constructive way. So there's just a snapshot there in terms of the power of that policy. So we're aware of the recommendations of making the LDP work for us, and the team are actively seeking to do that.
Thanks, Leader. That certainly gives us some clarity there. John, do you want to come back out on Councillor Angela's point?
I did see Councillor Angela was looking to indicate, was it a follow-up question or?
Yeah, I wanted to actually ask a question of Jake on planning, but also would like to come back to you, John, on the nature. So
Let's
either
hear
way
you
first.
Let's hear you first, John, and then we'll give Angela an opportunity to speak to ask up Jake.
Thanks. Yeah,
Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, I would like to see the risks come down, and as the work develops, around the nature recovery plan, there will need to be some significant step change in it to start reducing that risk. But yeah, there is officers in post, and through the member steering groups, through the climate change and nature recovery stuff, we would expect to see those risks come down as we start to develop these plans and work towards addressing the real concerns within the nature emergency.
So should it have a comment in there that the risk is that we don't get the funding to do some of these things, because if we don't have the funding and we can't actually deliver on these, then we're not going to make that positive impact that the report is highlighting?
I think it's a fair comment. I suppose it's a risk, whether that's a risk within the financial risks that we've covered before, or whether it sits within us when they're all interlinked. And I think it's that's a good description of how all these corporate risks link together.
Okay. Thank you, John, on that one.
And Councillor Angela, in relation to Councillor Jake's comments before.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So, Councillor Jake, you were talking about the new LDP and how we can make the planning system work for us in terms of climate and nature. So would there be anything in there, because I've got real concerns, I've raised them in planning previously, about the difficulties for people when they're looking to refurbish or repurpose some of the old building stock that we have in Powys. Obviously, we've got a lot of these Victorian buildings, change of use, etc. And I've got, well, I could give you a phone book thick list of people who are very frustrated because they're either trying to put their double glazing or put solar panels or mitigate the costs in running their home or their business, and they're prevented from doing so by sort of historical town centres and stuff. And is there any way within this that we can look at all of that to make this look much easier and smoother, to make these buildings useful, to minimise the number of new builds we'll need across the county?
Planning benefits, Councillor Angela.
Yeah, well, I think that's a really big question, because it's what we do with our existing housing stock, and there have been some very specific questions responded to recently because of the work of the development management team reaching out into communities in conservation areas, and actually there have been a number of enforcement cases against shopfront conversions, against householders that have put plastic double glazed windows in. And the advice, of course, is that there are other means to do this which both retain the character of a property through secondary glazing, for instance, and do that. So there is always a balance there, and the team do seek to try and advise people of sensitive ways to reutilize existing stock and make them livable. I think there is a tension, and I've seen this myself within the planning committee, over the replacement of older properties. So that's replacement dwellings. And that tension has seen the committee go against officer recommendations more recently. And I think from the draft policy I only read yesterday, I think the draft probably needs another look, because it's seeking to clamp down on the opportunities there. And actually, I think we need to broaden them out to try and retain those buildings, perhaps in an alternate use or a more subsidiary use, and allow modern buildings to come and provide modern accommodation fit for the next 200 years, and not just try and cram people's lifestyles now into properties which are 200 years old. So I'm not entirely sure that the policy I've seen that will be circulated next week yet does that, and I'm sure those members on the LDP working group will give it a thorough review next week. So I don't want to do that here, but I think safe to say it's one of those areas where we have to be very sensitive to the rich history that is here in Powys, but also the modern needs that we all have over warm and homes that are you can heat and stay cool, basically. So yeah, okay.
Thank you for that. I really welcome those comments. I still have concerns, but I very much welcome those comments, and I agree. None of us want to live in a museum, although we do absolutely want to retain our character, culture, and all of the important things that our different towns and villages have. So yeah, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Back to you, Councillor David.
Thank you, Chair. The next risk is adult social care 0064, which refers to the Welsh Community Care Information System being not fit for purpose. The current inherent risk is 20 and the residual rating is 20, and that's assigned to Nina Davis. I don't know if Nina's with us or somebody from adult social care.
Yeah, I think I can come in here, Chair.
Oh, Adam. Okay, Adam Greeno. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so there's a new social care management system contract that's been agreed, and the transition to the new system is planned for January 2025. Preparations include data cleansing and staff training, and we're working in collaboration with Carmarthen for insights on the new system, because they're already up and running with the system, I understand. And service continuity is improved with the current system, and there's been fewer outages. And that's it, really. That's the update on that.
Thanks, Adam. Questions? Nothing. Just a question from myself, please. Yeah, understand the new transition, etc., etc. I just wonder what contingencies in place if the new transition over to the new plan is delayed or failed. Are we clear that we can make these deadlines for next January?
I might ask Ellen to come in here if that's okay. If Ellen's available, she's probably more nearer to that than I am.
Yeah.
Anybody's got that? Go on, Ellen.
Of course, thank you, Chair. Yeah, we've got a programme of work around this. We've had the programme for the last year and a half put in place. So we're part of the national team, and a lot of the other local authorities are in the same situation as we are in terms of taking ourselves off of WCCS and moving ourselves onto a new social care platform. So we're working with the national team, we're working with the suppliers on this, and we've also got our local team and board as well. Part of that is the plans, which details the work that we need to do, and there's quite a lot of work that we do need to do, but it also includes the kind of actions that we need to take if along the way timeframes slip or there's any kind of challenges. So we have all got that wrapped up in our plan, and we do meet regularly. The task and finish groups at a national basis meet every month, and we meet every month as well. So yeah, that's all wrapped up in part of our plan.
Thank you. Just in that plan, to me, I think it's essential that we get user feedback. Is that built into it as well?
Yeah, so before we went out to procure the new system, part of that was to ask suppliers to come in and demo. And those demos are kind of the stakeholders around that include social workers, social care, IT, procurement, finance. So this time when we went out for the system, we had significant input from stakeholders in terms of making sure the system we procured is one fit for purpose. So yeah, really confident with this system that we have had that stakeholder engagement, and we have procured a system which will meet the needs of Powys.
Thank you, Ellen. Councillor Amanda will bring some expertise to this. Councillor Amanda.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I couldn't get my hand up quick enough before. Yeah, just a couple of queries for me. Obviously, it's positive in that there's been loads of problems with the previous system. But what about training? What level and extent of training will be required for during the transition period and when it's fully starting to be usable? Is that something that Powys is doing, or rather than reinventing the wheel, is that something that can be shared across with other local authorities? How does the need to train up people factor in with the busier periods of when the system is needing to be used? I'm just thinking, like, I know things from social services for children's goes quieter in August, and then there's often a bit of an influx of things in September when children are back in school. So just for those busier periods, how are you going to manage that with the implementation and training?
Thanks. Yeah, you're dead right in terms of the training around this. I think the first point to mention really is a system that we've bought. We buy systems which are quite easy to use. There's always a build, we build them up, and there's definitely training that we need. Again, within the plan, we've got a training element of the plan which we schedule out when the training's due. We always factor in times, and again, we talk to our social care kind of colleagues to understand those busy times and try and avoid them as much as we can. The training as well, we usually have a range of online face-to-face guidance, so it's a real range. So if someone's not able or haven't got the time at a certain day, we're able to pick that up in one-to-ones with them. So in terms of the national picture, so it is actually something we talked in the national group last week, because we will do our own internal training, because the system that we've bought is quite unique to Powys, even though there's kind of commonalities across other Welsh local authorities as well. But from a national picture, they're looking at procuring some training, which the funding would be picked up by themselves. But obviously, procure national training for potentially probably 20 local authorities, because some are not on the new kind of system, mean that's the way to go. So I think Powys's approach will probably be a bit of both: our local training specific to our needs, but the more general training, we would tap in and be part of that, a joint training that the national team would put on.
Thanks, Ellen. Councillor Amanda?
No, that's great. That's great. Thank you. I think that's answered my queries.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Chris?
Yeah, thank you, Ellen. I can see that there is progress with this now moving forward. In relation to the current system, it does mention within the risk about that system can have downtime. Have we had any incidences recently of any downtime? And if we have, how is that being addressed, and how quickly does that get resolved? And has there been any implications to residents or to our staffs in relation to their safety in being able to deal with that?
Sorry, Councillor Walsh, there was a bit of noise. Was there anything else in terms of your questions? Were those two?
No, I've got another one
Yeah.
on the. You mentioned then about data cleansing.
Yeah.
When is that likely to be completed? And then can I ask that once you've cleansed that data, is that then instantly being transferred onto the new system? Or do we have to wait until that system's operational before we then have to then bulk load that data? Because I would anticipate if that's about 12 months, 18 months away, then we may have to go and do data cleansing all over again, and we'll have then a time delay in that. And I just want to get clarifications of that. And plus it also gives us opportunity to test the system to make sure there's no glitches.
Yeah. Okay, I'll try and answer those three. I think just as I answered maybe the last one, John, in the background, can you just if you haven't got it in your head about the downtime, the recent downtimes. I think with the data cleansing question you asked, it's a very good point, and data cleansing is that we could cleanse data today and tomorrow it could be out of date because something else has gone wrong. So it's that continuous, with any system that we've got as well, especially a system with such a high priority like the WCCS, we constantly cleanse the data. But the approach that we took in kind of Powers, which was a lot forward really, in terms of we started this program a couple of years ago, and the first piece was to cleanse the data. Now, you can imagine the level of data that a system like that contains. So there was a lot of data cleansing that we needed to do, and we've taken the approach to actually have a real, I would see it as a real spring clean, and then what we're going to be doing going forward is that dusting around the edges. So we did a big chunk of cleansing, probably about eight months ago, but we're continuously cleansing through that. When we're at the system, so we're talking now at the moment about data extraction, so from WCCS into the current system we've got, that's a point that the data comes over, and like you said, Councillor Walsh, at that point we can start testing that data to see if it's clean data, the accuracy of it. So again, it's like an ongoing thing with that. I think with downtime, and so I'm not really close to the detail, hopefully John might be able to come in, but it has been a mixed kind of picture. And I think in the risk here, actually the downtime that we're seeing is far less than we used to a couple of years ago. In terms of how quick we recover, it usually depends on the reason and why we've got downtime. But again, I'll bring John in. The ones that I'm aware of, it is pretty quick, that it's up and working pretty quick. The instance where it might take a little bit longer, the service has got a business continuity plan. So for whatever reason, if the system is down, there is a backup system that they can utilise, and they have got their own business continuity plans that they will implement as well. So the impact to our residents, should be really kind of minimal, because those business continuity plans kind of kick in place there. But I don't know, John, in terms of downtime, is there any trends that you could share?
Yeah, happy to go into this. So in terms of periods of downtime, there hasn't been much for a while, to be honest. And when it has been, it's been quite quick. But what we do still suffer quite a lot is performance issues. So people, the service users, so social care staff that use the system, will find that pages load slowly and that sort of thing. So although that obviously has an impact on what they can do, it's not generally not providing a risk or reducing the risk of not being able to access the data. So we that's our general trend at the moment, in terms of, if a couple of years back there were long periods where, across Wales, and this was a real big issue. But it does seem better at the moment.
Thanks, John.
Okay, thanks, John. Councillor Angela.
Sorry, lost my cursor. Thank you, Chair. So I don't sit on the social care scrutiny, so I'm sort of not really sure how this works. So have I understood correctly that we have an information system, but it's not been working great for us? So we're transitioning to a new system, and this risk is about, well, if this system is not fit for purpose, then the impact on our ability to carry out our statutory operational duties. And that is what the controls and actions are all set to do. So have I understood that bit correctly?
It's a little bit blurred. So the risk itself is about the system itself and
Yes,
how fit for purpose it is. But when we're talking about the system, procuring a new system, that's part of the mitigation. So it gets blurred into something else then, if you know what I mean. But the actual risk that social services has identified is a current system which is not strong, it's not fit for purpose, but there's elements that aren't working. So that's where the risk lies.
Yeah, okay, that's good. I've understood that. So my question, and hopefully this has been answered in that adult social care scrutiny, because the potential consequences to vulnerable users are sort of fairly catastrophic when you read down that list here on page 11. The safeguarding of children could be compromised, etc., etc. So it doesn't say it in here, but are we just to assume, or should we be asking the questions, and what mitigations we're putting in place for that? And maybe those questions have already been asked in the adult social care scrutiny. But, when we're looking at the impact of what this IT system could have in reality on the ground, they're pretty catastrophic, aren't they?
Can I just confirm, Councillor kind of Davis, you're referring to the risks of the current system or the risks?
No, I'm reading your report here under potential consequences.
Okay.
So it's page 11 of the actual written report, a large writing, page 11 of the. So we've got the risk. The risk identified is the IT system. There's a whole list of potential consequences, but the reviews and the control and action are about the IT system, which, yeah, I understand that. That's a risk, but I'm just really asking a question, what we're doing to minimise those consequences.
Okay, so with regards to the risk and the consequences, they are based on the system being a fit for purpose system. So the mitigating actions around this are focused on the system itself. So a little bit black and white in terms of that if the system is appropriate and fit for purpose and the performance as well and the data's cleansed and we've got the information and we've got the training in place and all that those implications to those vulnerable adults won't be there linked to the system itself. You know, there will be other risks identified, but to the system itself. So that's why it's focused very much on the system and getting that right to make sure that we're able to process that data and work with those vulnerable people.
Yeah, I completely understand that. So I understand where your sort of responsibility for this lies, Ellen. That's totally, and you've covered that really well. Thank you very much. But I suppose I'm asking a question of somebody else. I don't know who, Chair, is in the room to answer because Nina's not here. But really, I'm just seeking some assurance that within our social care departments, for want of a better word, there are some mitigations in place until this system is perfect and up and running.
Perhaps
Am I making myself clear? Sorry.
Come on, Adam.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's a really good point. I think in the past the downtime and the chronic slowness of the system has really impacted on service delivery. But I think as Ellen's mentioned, there's been a lot of work done to mitigate that. And one of the things is now we have got a read-only system. So if the main system ever goes down, we're able to access the read-only and we're able to get that information. So my experience certainly in recent times is that there's some irritating problems, as mentioned, around slowness and things, but we aren't seeing the sort of acute problems we were seeing in the past. And I think whatever work's been done in the background, technical and things, seems to have fixed it and made it at least serviceable for now until we've got the new system. I don't know if that answers the question.
Yeah, it sort of does. I'm not sure, Chair, if this is the right place to keep pursuing this, but, just that one, I'm a safeguarding governor. So the safeguarding of children and adults in Powys could be compromised. So if the response there from Adam is saying, well, actually, that's minimal and, we're already got a system in place, well, then does that consequence need to be there? Or as it is there, should we continue to be concerned? I'm just picking one off that very long list.
I think the concern is certainly from an adult social care perspective. I think the concern now is a lot less. As I say, it's more now a slight frustration, and we're looking forward to having a new system. I think there's a lot of trust is lost in the system because of previous years when it's been so bad, but it's certainly improved in recent times, and I can't see anything that's really threatening to stop us delivering a service at the moment. I'm not seeing that.
Thank you, Councillor Angela. I think the point that you make is made, and it's just understanding the mitigation to that risk, isn't it? So yeah. Jane and Ellen, quickly add to that.
Yeah, just quickly, I mean, the consequence of the risk materializing is still there, but what we're doing is mitigating against it. So it's just to make that distinction.
Thanks, Jane. Councillor David, I'm going to ask you to move this on now, if you would, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just quickly for clarity, I've had a query around the order I'm taking these risks in. It's the order on page 42 under detailed risk information where the current residual ratings go from high to low. And just for your information, Chair, with regards to time management, we've got 12 risks on that particular page, and we're only on risk 5 now, and there's still 2 to come in the confidential session.
We seem to, I agree with you. I've let it run because I think we're picking up the high risks as well, which is important. So I intend to go to the confidential item at 4 o'clock. So whatever we haven't covered by then, hopefully we'll have been through the high risk ones. If that's acceptable with everybody else. Thank you.
Yeah. Right. So the next risk is property planning and public protection 0030, and that refers to the insufficient level of revenue maintenance and major improvement capital funding, and that's got a current rating, inherent rating of 20 and a residual rating of 16, and it's assigned to Gwilym Davis.
Can you take 0031 with that one? Would that be applicable as well? So we cover 2 risks. Yeah.
Could take the 2 together. They both for Gwilym. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Well, are we able to take 0056 as well? Because that will be under Gwilym as well, won't it? The Estain categorization.
That's down. It's assigned to Dr. Richard Jones.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Yeah. The first 2 then, please, Gwilym, if you're with us.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
That's good. In relation to risk 0030, this relates to the statutory compliance of assets. We've got a robust statutory compliance program in place that's monitored by a compliance board. We're now seeing the success of that board, and it's given us assurance that that work is being undertaken, and where there are issues reported, such as remedial works, we're ensuring that risk is managed in the interim time period, and if risk is unacceptable, we will withdraw the asset from use. So those controls are in place and are still considered suitable. With regard to the building stock, we are undertaking assessments of the building stock, the school building stock, and I've had a survey and assessment scheme completed recently, utilising Welsh Government monies as well as the council's money, and that should hopefully be reported to corporate leadership team and cabinet in the next couple of months. Again, we've got a programme of works for the school estate, and that is based on risk. And where risk is identified that is unacceptable, we will withdraw the asset from use. But we do look to manage the risk appropriately. And again, we believe that reporting it to the compliance board in relation to strategic property, as also the education compliance board, we've got appropriate oversight. And we're required secure additional funds, which is shown, for example, with regards to the safeguarding money that we're looking to secure where required. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Questions for Gwilym? Anything or nothing? Just one from myself, Gwilym. How does the council going to prioritise limited capital funding across our schools? How do you decide what becomes urgent and needs that priority at any time?
The work is prioritised in line with the asset management plan for the school estate, and generally it's the highest priority is health and safety and safeguarding works. If they are unacceptable there, then we will look to prioritise that funding. But there are lots of competing needs for that money, and we need to make sure that we are constantly reviewing the best way to spend that money so you get the maximum impact. But it is undertaken in line with the asset management strategy, and we're looking to review the asset management strategy and take it to cabinet later this year in approximately September, October time period.
Okay, I've got Councillor Allen and then Councillor Arwell.
Thanks, Gwilym. It's the split between schools and non-schools when you're talking about properties, estates. What is the rough splits of expenditure on maintenance? Do you have a figure? because I suspect everything else really, it's very hard for anything else to compete against schools. Is there a risk of non-school property being further down the list because of potential risk to children, etc.? Thank you.
With regards to the maintenance budgets, most buildings, corporate buildings, have got a maintenance budget. And where, for example, compliance work has been identified or building maintenance works are required, then it will be taken out of that maintenance budget that's allocated for that building itself. The schools budgets, we've got the 2.5 million pounds for the major improvement works. That's allocated purely for schools, plus there's property plus. There are some budgets that are crossover in relation to the remedial budgets. Generally, that is undertaken on a risk based approach, and I have to say schools normally are the beneficiaries of that element, because that is seen as where the highest risk is at the moment.
Okay. And the corporate assets that carry their own maintenance budget, are there reserves behind those or not, or do you almost spend every penny every year?
The budget in relation to the corporate property, it's very tight, and it's very difficult also to predict. And you're constantly trying to manage situation so that you're within budget at the end of the year. So we are generally there or thereabouts with corporate expenditure. For example, last year we had a small underspend. But in relation to that, I'd rather the money is spent on urgent matters. So that is something I have taken up with the team, because we do need to be breaking even, in my opinion.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Aldi. Thanks, William. I did have Councillor Arwell.
Yeah.
He doesn't.
No, thank you, Chair. No, that my question's been answered really. It was just regarding obviously the Eston report came back that there were serious issues with a lot of safeguarding issues on schools. But I think Councillor Gwilym has just covered that on his last response, really. So thank you for that.
Thanks, Councillor.
Sorry, Chair. Can I just come in relation to that? With regard to safeguarding, the corporate leadership and strategic leadership teams have requested that I put an additional risk in relation to safeguarding, because it's not just the physical buildings, it's also the management of the buildings as well. So recently a new risk in relation to the site security works has been placed within the planning and regulatory services risk register. So that will now be considered by CLT and SLT as to whether it should be reported for escalation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for highlighting that emerging risk there. Councillor David, I'm sorry if I'm rushing, but I don't see any other hands, so Councillor David.
The next risk is the education risk 056, which refers to the need to reduce the number of schools in formal Esting category to 0. That's got a current inherent risk of 12 and a residual rating of 16. And that's actually assigned to Dr. Richard Jones. I don't know if Richard's with us. Is there anyone with us from education? No, can't see anybody.
Councillor Alid.
Thank you, Chair. I was hoping to hear from education on this, but education is one of our core functions as a council. It takes up a huge amount of our budget, and it's tightly, I think, it's tightly associated with the last two risks, the 4Ps 0030 and 31. And also the finance risk, the 0001, because underneath that risk, we've got the delegated budgets that are overspent or a negative reserve in a number of the high schools. I can't remember the figure exactly, Chair, but maybe I should have discussed this with you before. But I got real concerns that the resources are being spread too thinly across our schools, and it's impacting, and you can see that impact on the latest risk, the EED 0056, around the standards that's achieved within our schools. And I'm just wondering whether I should take back to finance panel as chair of finance panel, and in coordination with you, chair, as chair of learning and skills, that we have a working group to try and understand what education system POWs can afford to run in order to achieve high standards and environments where children that is beneficial for the children to learn in. Maybe I'll take this offline and have a discussion with you, Chair, just to think about. We talk about transformation to achieve stable financial stability within the council, and without transformation of the school systems, I really don't think that can be achieved.
Thank you, Councillor Allard. You make an interesting contribution. The leader had popped his hand up before you spoke, but I'm sure the leader may give some comment on that as well. Councillor Jake.
Yeah, I mean, nicely taken off script and away from the agenda slightly. And of course, as scrutiny chairs and finance panel chair, you can set your own programme of work and interrogate any areas of the council's business that you choose to do. But just in relation to the school budgets, of course, the school outturn reports will be available shortly for review, so you can have a look at those. But what I wanted to say in respect of the Estin side that you were talking about there is, of course, at the moment we're in a period of Estin review. Only yesterday I was sat down with the deputy leader and the portfolio holder in the Estin conference day, when we were feeding back the changes that we'd been making within the corporate plan, the integrated business plan, and of course changes that will go right down to the individual personnel level through the schools down to staff. So I think we are taking very seriously the issues around school finances, and I'm really pleased about the number of schools, for instance, that have closed their finances in year in association with the budget that we fully funded against the formula this year. So I think there is no one from education here, but this is an area where there has been rigorous examination, and that continues around how we spend resources within schools, obviously in responding to Estin, and you'll see much more of that beyond today's conversation, Chair.
Yeah, thank you, leader. If you'd stay there, I hear what you're saying there. I really do recognise what you're saying. But obviously you didn't mention the Accelerated Improvement Board, and they will be a key feature in this. And I just wonder, in relation to mitigating this risk, I don't know if you're well placed to answer this, but how will they measure success and ensure sustainability? That will be the mitigation to this risk.
So obviously the Accelerated Improvement Board is a temporary measure. It's not there to be a long-standing thing. It's a response to put in place plans that will then go back into the systems to be monitored in the normal way through scrutiny, through CLT, Cabinet, and papers coming forward. So there are clearly targets that are coming through the integrated business plans that we will monitor in the normal way, and that either through here or the various, well, your scrutiny committee, Gwynfor, and I'm sure the finance panel as well. We all have a role to play in monitoring and managing the performance within our schools.
I noticed Jane's put her hand up, and I'm going to take Councillor Gary and Councillor Jeremy first, just in case there's some answers there that can be found through Jane. Councillor Gary.
Thanks, Chair. Mine was perhaps a reflection on, I don't sit in learning and skills or some of the other scrutinies that look at schools in more detail, but obviously schools affect all of us, don't they? They're in every ward and really important to all of our communities. But the risk assessment here is hard to get a feeling for. It's really short, it's not very detailed, hasn't got many actions behind it, yet it's rising in risk. I don't know actually personally how many schools are in that Estin special measures. It would have been handy just to have, we were in this, we've had the report, we're now in this number. I assume there's a rise from the previous one, otherwise the risk wouldn't go up. But just in terms of us trying to look at the strategic risk register, and I take it's a strategic risk register. It can't have every amount of detail in it. I'm struggling with this one. I don't see that there's enough in it to help that risk rating come down. So therefore, it's just a push for that educational team, that improvement board, to really just, we've got to strengthen this, haven't we? Because if our schools are struggling, the whole sector of our community start to struggle. So thank you.
Chair,
Yeah, no, I think that's a good
back
point,
to
Councillor Gary. We're looking for specific actions which are being taken. I think
so
what
if
needs
I
to
may,
be-
Chair, obviously
Go on.
through the integrated business plan that we are now putting together to respond specifically to the challenges of the Estin report, I think it's perfectly legitimate for the Gary's response there, because I suspect what will happen is that we will now take some of those actions once agreed into an adjustment of this risk. So you will see a cross-reference between those actions and an updated risk here. I think that's entirely sensible, and I'm sure, Jane, that's an action you can take away from this.
Okay, thanks, Leader. Councillor Jeremy.
Thank you. We've used some words today: sustainable powers, statutory duties. I think we need to have proper definition of what both are. I've asked over many years, what are statutory duties? What do we definitively have to have? We've never seen a list. So these words are so easy to use, but everyone seems to have different definitions, and I'd like to get clarity on it. When we're struggling for money, part of our problem is our post-16. As we're all aware, that post-16 affects the amount of settlement we have of national government. So yet our post-16 doesn't seem to feature with our education bill. It seems again that we're developing the business from the middle out, not from the top down or the bottom up. And I just can't understand that. So if there's money in post-16, we need to be working on our post-16 so we bring the money in. And to be able to turn around and alter education, I don't believe people make bad decisions because they want to make bad decisions, but the bad decisions have obviously been made because our education is going downhill. We need to go back to learn what bad decisions we made and why, stop altering for what we've done now and trying to put it right and understand where we went wrong. Because all we're doing is making matters worse instead of improving. So I urge us, look back, look at the answers, look when our education was doing well, learn from that, look at what decisions we made, and then rectify the problem. Don't rectify what's itching on your back. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. I'm going to bring Jane in there, please.
Thank you, Chair. So just going back to talking about the Accelerated Improvement Board and the actions being delivered through education to manage this particular risk, I think we're all absolutely acutely aware of the need for lasting change and not just a one or knee-jerk response now. And I can assure you that you will see that coming through, as the leader's already said, through the integrated business plan for the education service itself, but also through the updated corporate strategic equality plan. That is very clear when you see it around the success that we're looking to achieve, the actions and objectives that are being taken to get us to that point, but also the measures that will be routinely monitored to ensure that that is happening and that we are on track. So I think you won't have seen all of that detail as yet, but obviously that will be coming to you. But that will be fundamental for making sure that we do keep on track to make the improvements needed. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Jane. Councillor Allard.
Just very quickly, the inherent risk and residual is quite unusual for this education risk. After putting the mitigation in, it goes up to 16. It was 12 and goes up to 16. I think that's probably the only risk that has happened.
No, can I explain that?
Going the other way, and also the corporate plan, and until this last review now, there were absolutely no education targets within that at all, were there?
Okay, I think Councillor David's coming back
No,
in.
I was just going to mention with regard to the risk, you'll notice that under the previous residual rating, there's no previous. It is a new risk that came onto the register, I think, in Q3. So the 12 rating would be when it was sitting on the actual service register. But when they identified that there was a problem developing, they escalated it to the strategic risk register, and that's obviously got a score of 16 as a result of that.
Yes, but the so that risk register for the education was wrong in the past, was it? Or why?
No, it was right. But when obviously when the number of schools in that Estin category started increasing, there was a request to escalate it from the service register to the strategic risk register, the corporate strategic risk register. And that's why you've got limited information attached to the actual risk within the corporate strategic risk register. And obviously, as that sits there longer, you'll see far more detail backing up that particular risk.
I appreciate that, but surely the score from the service risk register should be the same score as it is on the strategic risk register. It's just
it wasn't sitting on the strategic risk register when it was scoring 12. It came onto the strategic risk register when it increased to 16.
So just to clarify that, David, I'm trying to, Alid, I'm trying to help here, David. So it moved from 12 to 16. That's why it became on the strategic register.
So the 12, the current inherent rating initially, that applied when it was sitting on the service register before it actually came onto the strategic risk register. That increase in the rating was the reason for it coming onto the strategic risk register.
Okay, Jane, but you've been putting mitigation in. You've been putting there's mitigation there, which should bring down the risk. Would that 16 have been even higher then, without that mitigation?
I think Jane's coming in to help here.
Only to say, of course, remember this is the Q4 position. So a lot of that mitigation has taken place now during the last several months we've been working on this now. So you will see a revision and a review of that risk and the scoring of it in response to all of that mitigation that will be coming forward. So I think we need to watch this one obviously carefully for obvious reasons, but you need to see where it lands when we get to Q1 as well of the new year.
I'm going to come back to you now, Councillor Alid. Does that help?
Yes, but it's not satisfactory really. I understand where you're coming from, Jane and David, but the Estin were there in mid Q4 and mitigation. Lots of actions were being put in immediately on Estin being in and pre-Estin as well. So because a lot of these inspections have taken place before the actual inspection itself. But I accept where you're coming from. It's a case of watching this brief, but I still think that we should take away a discussion and try and understand whether we are asking the schools to do the impossible with the budget we are currently supplying, delegated budget we're giving them. Thank you.
Okay, point is made. Look into the committee now, and David also. My reading of the report, that covers off the high risks in the report. We're not going to get through all the risks, and we still got to go into confidential session. I also note in the chat that we're losing a lot of members at 4 o'clock. We have to do some recommendations as well. And the meeting was set for 2 hours, and I'm always mindful of officers who've committed their time and may have other ways. Members, I'm looking for a suggestion how you want to move forward now. Or David, what do you think is appropriate? Have I read that we've covered the high risks? I know we as a scrutiny committee need to cover the risk register, but I'm mindful of time.
Yeah, you've covered the high risk, but the residually high risks anyway. There are some high inherent there, but obviously the mitigating actions have brought those down. So I think you've had the discussion around the high risks.
Members, are you content that we leave it there, or do you want to overrun on this meeting? Councillor Ansler.
Yeah,
Councillor
just supporting you, Chair, there in that statement. The high risks have been done, and we do have those 2 confidential items. So yeah, happy to support your view there, Chair.
Okay, Councillor Alid. Aled, your microphone. Still your microphone. There you go.
Sorry, Chair. We had that opening discussion about the recruitment being reduced. I was just wondering, that's a cross-council issue. Are there any parts of the council that there are still significant risks at the service level?
Yeah,
because you're looking at a corporate risk there rather than at service level.
Yes.
So I was just wondering if, there used to be a problem with social workers or social workers in the children's section, and I know that's improved a lot, but.
No, that's a good point. Obviously, the risk score has been reduced there, but yeah, it's something which we need to monitor. So we'll have a quick comment on that, and I'd like to add these comments. Are there any remaining hard to fill roles or services still under pressure? So yeah, if somebody could do that, Paul, please.
Yeah, thanks, thanks, Chair. What we have found is some of the really hard to fill vacancies we've had in the past, we managed to resolve through our new our new approach to recruitment. So, as an example, trade staff, we've always struggled to recruit trade staff. We can now recruit trade staff. We've always struggled to recruit rebels and support workers. We can now recruit them. Councillor Allard was very relevant there. He touched on social workers. Through our Grow Our Own initiatives, we've managed to internally develop a lot more social workers. But what I would say, he's quite right. There'll always be some posts somewhere in the council where we will still see a challenge. What we've said within the risk analysis is that's one area we'll continue to do. We'll support services in trying to address those challenges. It's like squeezing a balloon. You don't know where they're going to pop up until you squeeze the balloon. So I can't rattle them off, Councillor Allard, but I can give you an assurance that we will work with services to address any such concerns. Thanks.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you. Can I just quickly comment on that? Do you include care workers who work for outside organisations? Because my experience in my board, we're really struggling. People are waiting for months and months and months to get a care worker. I can think of an example of an elderly man struggling with his wife with dementia. It's been months and months and months, and they still haven't got somebody in place. Does this risk cover that sort of appointments?
I mean, this risk is about what it says on the tin. It's about the risk the council will be able to recruit to council vacancies.
So that's council only vacancies and not
council only,
council
direct vacancies. I mean, what we can do, Councillor Allard, working with our colleagues in social care, if any kind of third party companies want to talk to us about our approach and how we do it, we'd always be willing to help share kind of thoughts and ideas. So I'm quite happy to work with social worker colleagues on any such thing, really. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no, thanks, Councillor Allard. And Councillor Andrews rightly put in the chat as well that there's a presentation on recruitment and the thing. Councillor Chloe.
Yeah,
Thank you. And hopefully this is just going to be a quick one. It's just to clarify my understanding here. I've got 2 risks that weren't in the strategic risk register that I thought would to me feel like strategic risks, but it might be that they're based somewhere else and they've not been elevated to this risk register at the moment. So the first one is around shocks and disruptions like pandemics, and whether the council's got a plan and a strategy in place to deal with anything in the future that comes down the line that could be challenging for residents across Powys. So when we all have to stay at home, when we can't get our food deliveries, or when we can't get access to services across the area, it would be really good to know we've got a plan of action, things like that happening. And then the other one is about engagement. I think it's a real risk to the council if we don't get engagement right across the area, for all sorts of reasons, including things like elevated numbers of complaints, making the wrong decisions about things, or not taking people with us when we do strategies. So I don't know whether that doesn't come up as high enough on the register to be counted as strategic, but I would like to hear from officers and cabinet to see whether or not they could be included or are already somewhere else.
Thanks, Chloe. Who would like to pick that up?
I think with regard to the pandemic, there was a risk sitting on the risk register, but I think that was actually addressed through the emergency planning section. Perhaps Jane could add some more to
Jane
this.
has got her hand up. Yep, you're absolutely right, Councillor David.
Yeah, I think that loss of potential business is covered in our business continuity plans. So each service has a continuity plan, and within that we all set out a number of potential risks that could upset that delivery. And I know pandemic is clearly one of those. It was previously, but I think we've even strengthened those elements since we've been through one. Obviously, that we've learned some lessons from that as well. So I think in terms of any recommendations that come out of committee, if we can explore whatever it is, but I know those are very much covered in those business continuity plans. I can't recall off the top of my head now, because I've been focusing on strategic risk, whether the engagement is actually factored in at a service level, but I'll double check that through and we can have a look. But again, if it's a recommendation coming from the committee, then of course we can look at it.
Thank you, Jane. Councillor Chloe, are you content?
Yes, thank you. I would, well, we're going to go to recommendations later, but I'd like to have one included on the engagement. So thank you.
Okay. Is there anything else on the strategic risk register you want to pick up on before we go to confidential? No? Okay. I'm going to suggest now that we need to discuss any recommendation in relation to this so that it's in the public knowledge, and then we'll go into confidential session. I'm going to be bold to say there may not be any recommendations. Chloe spoke about one now, but otherwise I see it as one of those reports for observations. Or has anybody got a burning recommendation that they feel they should add to this report as per Cabinet's consideration? Am I reading that right? Councillor Liz?
I don't have any, Chair. I think there are a number of issues that were raised. There was some from Councillor Angela about safeguarding and the WISIC system. But I think they're all things that can be clarified, with the leads of service and outside this meeting and outside the recommendations.
Thank you, Liz. Is everybody content that we're not making any recommendations, and then we'll just put a paper for noting for the Cabinet together, yeah? Is that what everybody is preferencing? How does that sit with you, Kath? Is that okay?
Hi, Chair. Yes, if there are no recommendations forthcoming, we can put a observations form together. Absolutely no problem.
Okay, we'll move on. Thank you very much. Members, I'm looking for somebody to propose that we go into confidential session. Councillor Chloe, and I'm going to take Councillor Chris as a seconder, and I'm going to assume all in favour that we move into confidential session, which will be duly explained when we go into confidential session. So when Kath gives us the head up, we'll go into confidential session to discuss a couple of guidelines within the report.